Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. It's me and my twin. We are having a conversation about I'm the better looking version, obviously, but just to be clear, we're talking a little bit about what's been in the news the last couple of weeks, and seeing what sort of pops out. One of the things we noticed, well, I should probably introduce my guest. My guest is Rudy Dajie. I actually interviewed Rudy for another podcast recently, and he was gracious enough to say he'll jump onto this one. So he doesn't know what he's gotten himself into. So we're just going to explore that. Rudy, how are you?
Good, man. I'm in it to win it. And don't always believe what your mom tells you about how good looking you are, because she's biased.
He is. But I'm also basing this on the dog contest I entered. They all were like best in show. So, but it all works out. So Rudy, before we jump on, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Rudy Dajie. I'm a serial entrepreneur, pharmacist like yourself. Just I'm not a lawyer, so I can't get myself out of trouble. Just get myself into it, and I got to pay you guys to help me out. And
not everyone's perfect.
I'm in Massachusetts, and just doing my thing. I mean, what else? What else should I tell you about myself? I could go on for hours talking about myself.
I know. Moderation's not your strongest suit. It's fine. We're going to talk a little bit about. Well, we had a few different options to talk about. So let me see if we can start with the first one, which is this new news that we now have Instagram influencers starting to talk about pharma. So as a pharmacist, what's your take on that, Rudy?
I mean, I bought this stuff for my beard, and they said that it was going to make it not be gray naturally,
right.
And it didn't work. So I don't really have an issue with it. I mean, I see it's happening. It's happening in all different avenues, right? I mean, it's happening in the alcohol industry. You've got people like Brett Favre and their wrapping like copper pipes around their knee, and now they can go back to the NFL. And you got like, who is it, Doug Flutie, and what's that dude's name? Oh, Frank Thomas, talking about like Nugenics, and like they're like back to saddling up in the bed. So I think people can't be sheep, and you got to use your brain a little bit.
Yeah, but is that unfair? I feel like the idea that we're going to ask people to figure out what works and what doesn't is an unfair thing to ask for. I mean, there's something called the learned intermediary rule in the law, which basically says that we have doctors because you, the average person, don't know what you're looking at. It's sort of like asking me, and you're in real estate, so I can mention this. It's like asking you or me to go, is this building safe? And could we use it? Yeah, there's a certain amount of like common sense you can use, but at a certain point you need an architect. And to me, this is the same thing. Like, do I really want to be depending on an Instagram influencer and going buyer beware? Or is there a certain point at which no, this needs a doctor, this needs a pharmacist to really come in and talk about it? But is that unfair?
I mean, are you talking about, I mean, they still have to, if you're talking about prescription product, they still got to go through a doctor, right? So
sure.
I mean, that whole business has been extremely commoditized anyway. Right now, you're talking about ED drugs. You can just sort of get on the internet and like talk to a doctor and you get a prescription. Now they've got that for birth control, all of these sort of low impact medications, a lot easier access to them. So I mean, if it's for prescription products, you still have those gateways to entry, right? So you could have an influencer that's out there saying that, if I take Pepto-Bismol, like, my butt gets bigger, and they still have to sort of have an access to that entry point. I mean, obviously I know Pepto's at OTC, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, so where do you think the cutoff should be? What can they be sort of out there talking about? I mean, is it that they can talk about like what? Like where does that end for you?
So for me, it comes down to a very simple thing. For me, it's all about about the fact that you need to be very clear that you're being paid to do this. So there's a difference, for example, between Rudy going on saying this stuff worked for me, and Rudy being paid to say this stuff worked for me. So I think that disclosure and that transparency is kind of critical. So that's number one. I think the second piece of, and that's actually an FTC rule. The FTC comes out and says that you need to be transparent. The fact is, most people aren't, but it's an FTC rule. The FTC just doesn't enforce it as much as it probably should. The second question then becomes, what are they saying? Is it, quote unquote, and this is coming from a Supreme Court case, is it truthful and not misleading? So if it is truthful and not misleading, we have certain limits to which you can actually regulate that speech. But I think that in even that test, I think Instagram influencers are notorious, and TikTok influencers are notorious for not enabling people to like, they don't actually know what they're talking about. They're a bunch of kids, and a bunch of kids who aren't educated.
Yeah.
So the fact is, like, I see this more in like the financial. I follow a lot of those financial gurus, if you will, and they're usually kids who don't know what they're really referring to. And they'll say things like, oh yeah, you need to put money into your 401k. Conceptually, that's a great idea, but is it right for every person? And they don't give the context for people to make that decision. As a overall rule, you absolutely should contribute to your 401k. But if you've got credit card debt, for example, that is not where your money should be going. Pay off your credit card debt. But that nuance, I'm not sure it's nuance, it's kind of blatant, but that conversation just doesn't happen. It's bad enough when you're doing it at a financial level. It's even worse when you're talking about, you know what? And I'll take the term you use, low impact drugs like, and you sort of mentioned Viagra. I would argue it's not a low impact drug. If you're taking if you're taking, what is it, amiodarone or one of those, like or warfarin, there are interactions, and the low impact drugs are what get you into trouble. I keep thinking about.
You're a way better pharmacist than I am. I wouldn't have remembered that stuff. I mean, if
I remember the blue halos. It's supposed to be halos with like Viagra and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if I was taking Viagra, I would be hoping it would be a high impact.
I'm not even going to touch that. We already have people coming in and oh, I don't actually know what that means. I literally got someone responding in Cyrillic, so I don't even know.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, that. Thank you. So that would be my first thing. But here's the part that I have a problem with. I'm looking at this. That's why my human chose to preserve my DNA with Viagen, pets, and equine genetic preservation. And this person had 510,000 followers. And that's a problem to me. The idea that someone with that kind of influence, like, is there really a gap now between this person who has 510,000 followers and say a Dan Rather who would have said this on 60 Minutes 20 years ago?
Well, and that's where I'm at too. To your point, like I don't necessarily know if it's just an influencer thing, because The Rock is an influencer, right? Like, I mean,
absolutely.
Anybody with clout is an influencer, right? I mean, that's just sort of like, we're talking about influencers, which are just people that. Oh wow, I'm getting feedback.
Oh, can you still hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
So
still too much feedback?
Yeah, I'm getting some feedback here. I don't know why.
Well, drop out, come back in.
All right, sure.
Okay. So while Rudy's dropping out and coming back in, we can talk a little bit about sort of what's out there. And we're seeing this ad, by the way. They're talking about the Owl Smart Sock, and they're saying that it tracks an infant's heart rate and blood oxygen levels, and was promoted by this person. And that sounds conceptually like a good thing, right? Hey, Rudy. Hey. So we're talking about this Owlet Smart Sock that's on the ad, and they're talking about how it tracks an infant's heart rate and blood oxygen levels. And that sounds like a good thing. But do you see a line, a limit where that's crossed the line? Like today it's smart socks. Tomorrow it's you should be measuring your kid's breathing, for argument's sake. And yeah, that sounds like a good thing, but when is it crossing the line? When does privacy kick in? And who owns this data?
I mean, those are all good questions. And I think that I don't know. I mean, is it really the government's job to protect people from themselves? I mean,
yeah, absolutely, that's the government's job.
I mean, isn't it bad though that we can't even think for ourselves? I mean, like, how sheep are we? We're just there for the slaughter. I mean, we don't have any. We won't even call it common sense anymore. We'll just call it sense. Nobody has any sense because it's not common.
Fair enough. So let's take the comment you're making. You're saying, is it the government's job? Let's assume that it's not the government's job. Whose job is it? You're saying that it should fall on each individual?
Well, I think I should be accountable for my own choices and not just dump it off and say, well, you know, I followed an influencer, this person that, you know, I mean, if somebody got on the internet tomorrow and was this big guy, like, you know,
The Rock, for argument's sake,
like some workout guy that, you know, I'm following him, and he gets out there and he says, listen, man, if you take, you know, this beet chew gum, you know, before you work out, you can bench 350. Like,
right.
I'm not going to just do this and get under there and just do 350. I wouldn't try that. Right. Like, maybe I'd work up to it. Maybe, and yeah, maybe I'm reasonably educated.
Right.
But I think you got to be like,
how many years of college did you have before you could do that, though? Before you went, I may not know what I'm talking about, or that I need to work my way up. I need to work my way up to this point, and I maybe need to get some extra help if I don't know the answer to this question. The average person goes, he's doing it. He's still alive. Maybe I can do it.
Yeah.
So to me, there's a balance, and to me, I like the idea of making information accessible. I think that's important. That's critical. But I think that making information accessible without context is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a challenge. But like, where does it start and where does it stop? Because, you know, it's being done on TV. It's not just on Instagram. It's not just on TikTok. Yeah, I mean, look at this dude.
I'm going to tell you this. That looks freaking delicious.
Yeah, I mean, I would like it without the, like, you know, scallions. I'm not a big scallion guy. So if we ever get together for dinner.
The sauce looks amazing. Yeah, and I love like the thin-skinned wontons. You'd never get those.
Oh yeah, that does look really good. Yeah, you know, maybe we should let's pivot. Ask him if he made that himself.
Oh, I expect he did. Hired at-home chef Peter Duong as a paid partner in its Pepsi Comfort campaign.
I mean,
and they pull that from his.
Why would you choose that? Like, I would want like a bowl of pasta with a big red sauce before I would want to see a Pepsi commercial. I don't really associate wontons or whatever this is with the girl.
Spice. I can see spice in the too.
Well, you know, I'm Indian. I like spice.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like my spice, which is why I like this. In fact, I think I might have to go get that tonight. That looks delicious.
Can we talk about something that's really more important here for 1 second?
What's that?
It's 6:15 on a Friday night, and I'm on the phone with you. I really need to get a girlfriend. This is like bad.
I think you need a life. Yeah, I mean, I think a girlfriend can only offer so much. I mean, that's a lot. That's a huge burden on a girlfriend. Like, can you get me a social life?
Do you come with friends of your own so I can be there?
In fact, I don't need you. Can I just have your friends?
Right.
That's sort of, go ahead.
No, so yeah, circling back to this, I mean, I think that people can relate, and Pepsid's over the counter. I guess if you have questions, I mean, I'm there, but I mean, most of the pharmacists I know don't want to answer your questions anyway.
Right.
You know, like, I got to fill these 75,000 prescriptions today. So, and I got to make, 85 patient phone calls.
So let's assume we're not talking about medication, right?
Yep.
And we're talking about a one of those house flipping shows.
Okay.
Do you think that the house flipping shows have made it look like house flipping's too accessible and that it's easy and that anyone can do it? Because I can tell you, for me, it looks super easy.
It
And
does
when I
look.
go to do
Yeah,
when
I agree. I think any of those things like fixer uppers or
Right,
or like if you watch like where they build these custom cars, right? Like I mean,
right,
yeah, it looks easy, like oh, you just like bang on the metal and shape it and like paint it and it's beautiful, right?
right. And
I
that's my
agree.
point.
Yeah, I agree. But I think then if you were to say, listen, I want to go and flip houses, you'd have to dig into it a little, right? Like I couldn't just show up and buy a house. I'd be like, okay, well, I need money. All right, so let me go to the bank.
I can show up and buy a house, though. That's exactly what I can do. And then go, crap, I don't know what I'm doing. But now I have a house behind me. What's worse is when you have you did that with the drug and there's no way to back out of it. With a house, your worst case scenario is the fact that you have a house and that you have a loss and you have a bank that's going to repo something. In the case of health, you don't even have that option.
Yeah, I mean, well, scroll down. Like, what drugs are they talking about that are being sort of?
Well, let's see, Pepsid AC.
Yeah, like that's not a drug, man. Come on.
It's what you call a low impact drug, right?
It's low impact, no impact.
There's like we've now established that in the Rudy world, there's something called low impact drugs. It is
I
not
mean,
something the FDA considers.
right? Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's over the counter. You can take it. It's fine.
Well, there are limits to that. I just want to flash this just so that people know this is not clinical advice.
This is not clinical advice. Even if you came in and I was working the bench, do not take my clinical advice.
For those people who think that Rudy is going to be sitting behind a bench, that's where you have a problem. If you
Yeah.
see him run,
Right.
you still have time.
That's right.
But here's the thing: like apparently in 2018, Natural Cycles secured reality television likes of Vanderpump Rules to plug its contraceptive thermometer and digital app, which helps users track fertile days based on basal body temperature. So my question there would be, again, these sound like inherently good things, but if that's a good thing, why is it not okay? To me, the movement from um, low impact drugs to high impact drugs, for lack of a better term, your cancer drugs, is very short.
Yeah,
Conversely,
I think it's a slippery slope. You're right.
it's a very slippery slope. And right now we can say talk to your doctor, and that's become the basis of saying there are limits to this. But doctors are going, we get too many questions by people who don't know what they're talking about. So I don't know. Do you think that this creates a whole new category of talk to your pharmacist? And pharmacists who are already too busy are going, I can't advise you because you're asking questions I just don't want to get into.
Dude, pharmacy has always been the access point for everything. Here in Massachusetts, at one point, they were going to have pharmacies be like the needle drop off depot. Like
Right.
it was insane. They were like, yeah, no, I mean, we could just drop off used needles at the pharmacy. I'm like, I became a pharmacist because I don't want to touch people.
That is not why I became a pharmacist. I love people, actually. We have very different views of what a pharmacist does. But to be fair, you actually went and did home care, basically, right? That was your shtick.
Yeah, we provide medications for patients that resided in the community. Yes.
Right. So you never actually had to deal with patients directly. That's
Correct.
what you
We're a closed door
for.
shop. We didn't really have
Right.
patients interacting. But I mean, I've worked retail, I've worked in other spaces.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that it is gratifying when you can talk to a person and actually help them, overcome an issue or identify something that maybe has been overlooked and it can circle back. So, man, all joking aside, I think that is important. There is a space for that. But I think pharmacists get a lot of questions because it's the access to pharmacists are easy. It's either a phone, which we answer, or you can literally walk into our space and we can't get away.
Right.
So, we've, I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Right.
So it's just access. And I think that do I think that that's where it's going to be? Can you hear me still?
I can still hear you.
I don't know if that's going to be where everybody goes. I think a lot of people don't really even want to ask questions, though.
You know what I think is actually a space for pharmacists to really cause an impact, and no one's doing it. So this is what I think is the next multi-billion-dollar idea for an industry, but no one's really doing it, is pharmacists get into digital health. Because there's no, like, doctors are going, there's just too much volume of digital information coming at me. You've got pharmacists saying, I'm licking, sticking, counting, pouring. What I really wish there was is someone going, look, I see the number of steps you're doing. I see the digital information that you're collecting. Let me pull it all together and let's talk about what this actually means for you. Like, are you actually better today than you were 6 months ago? And no one's pulling that information together. And I think a pharmacist is ideally placed to do that. But is there a reason you think that that pharmacists aren't capturing the space of accessible digital health explainer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do with pharmacists are horrible advocates for themselves, right? I mean, we're not even what considered practitioners by CMS regulations, right?
Sort of. I mean, it's now changing with vaccine delivery and stuff like that. But you're right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we have regulations that vary state to state on like pharmacist to tech ratios. Have you ever heard of a prescriber or doctors that put up with that say, hey, listen, I can only have so many nurses and I can only have so many receptionists, and because I can't manage.
Dude, that's hospitals. Every single hospital.
What? They have ratios in hospitals?
Yeah, you didn't know this?
No.
For example, ICU, the average nurse to patient ratio is 2-1. That's why ICUs cost so much. General floor is, I think, 6-8-1.
Okay. All right. Well, I didn't realize that part. So I'll back down on that. You can win there.
My point is, I would disagree with your premise itself, though. I would argue that pharmacists are incredible advocates. I think the worst advocates are probably like doctors. And when I say doctors, I should be clear, medical doctors. But the reason I think pharmacists are great advocates is we literally had the NECC tragedy with compounding.
That was in my backyard, man. That was a nightmare for me.
Yeah, I bet it was in your backyard.
It was in my backyard.
Like literally, or?
I mean, like literally a few towns over from where I was operating my business. I had just bought my business, and then next thing you know, I had the board of pharmacy like crashing the boards in my pharmacy. It was like they kicked over every stone in everybody's pharmacy.
Wow.
We all paid penance for that.
Yeah, I bet. And quite honestly, but that's my point. Like, despite what it was, 600 people being hurt, 70 people dead, we didn't really like change the practice of pharmacy. We got some more rules in there. But compounding as a general overall thing is exactly where it was. I think we've got a little bit more inspections. We've got the ability to register. But and one might argue that there are more rules. And I'd be curious if having practiced at both sides, at a practical level, I don't think it changed that much. What's your take?
There's a lot more compliance, a lot more oversight.
Let's explore that. So let's take a lot more compliance. What does that mean to you? In what context?
Well, now there are just a lot more regulations, right? There's more reporting standards. You had to do more analysis.
But to whom? Who are you reporting this to?
Well, I guess they were internal, but the board, when they do inspections, would request to see those things, right? So it's like.
Sure. But here's my question: when you talk about compounding at the board level, let's be honest. Does the board really understand how compounding? Like, they understand what it works as a general rule, but I've been through board inspections, I've been through FDA inspections, and there is a world of difference between those two. Because FDA deals in quality, and the board's looking at, do you have your numbers there? Like, what do those numbers mean? Like, are you actually digging in? And I think at a practical level, I think there's loads to be done so that patients are safer. And I think we as pharmacists are incredible advocates at going, no, we're going to sort of protect this. And this is what we do. And I think we need to do more for our patients. And I'm not saying that pharmacists don't want to do for their patients. In fact, I think pharmacists want to do for their patients all day, every day. But I think we can do more. I think there's certain things we're terrible at advocating for. And I really wish we'd get off this bandwagon of becoming prescribers. I really don't think there's a need for another prescriber out there. But that's been the hill that ASHP and all of them have been willing to die on for literally the last 20 years. I mean, you and I were graduating. I can tell you, I was getting that information that, oh, soon pharmacists will be able to prescribe. This was 2002. So, like, I don't see the point. I don't know how we got there from Twitter influencers, but
yeah. And we didn't even talk about the Twitter influencers yet.
Well, Instagram influencers.
Yeah.
We're going to use that.
But I mean, I get what you're saying. I just, I think we don't band together very well. You know, we're just very segmented. And
how do you figure?
Well, you got the corporate chains that are doing their sort of piece, sure. And then you've got independents that are trying to operate in a space, and we don't all collaborate on initiatives together. And then you get compounding that's operating in their own niche, and they're trying to advocate in their own way.
That's any industry, isn't it? It's just they have different goals.
And to your point about what you were saying earlier, like what a pharmacist could do, and like that's the next $1 billion venture. I think the challenge is that we're always been tied to a product, and that's how we get revenue.
Right.
I mean, yes, now there's things like medication therapy management where like we are getting some payment for our knowledge.
Are we really doing much of that though? I feel like that's one of those things that someone threw us a bone, and we don't really do that in any serious way.
No, and I mean, you really can't. You couldn't do that explicitly and be like, I'm gonna. There are companies that try to do that explicitly, say this is how we're gonna bear revenue stream. But right. if you're like legitly spending that much time looking at people's like medication history and adherence, and then trying to make interventions like and getting $60, it's just not every 6 months, right? Like you do twice a year for a CMS patient or a Med D patient, right? So
the funny thing is, I used to do that. I used to do that in 2002. I remember doing a rotation in a drug and alcohol clinic where we had to go in every 6 months and look at the charts. And they were looking at a whole bunch of these nursing homes. And I expect you probably did that as part of your business, actually.
Yeah.
So my point is, there is that market. But why do you think it hasn't really picked up? I mean, the cost of drugs is so high, according to most people. So wouldn't that be an easy place to save money?
Yeah, I don't think everybody can get together on, you know, like the government wants us to save money, and the PBMs, you know, don't want to dispense drugs, and we want to dispense drugs because that's how we get paid, right? So adherence is helpful for the patient and as well as for the business side of pharmacy, right? I think that everything just doesn't align correctly so that everybody's marching to the same beat.
So let's frame this differently. What if we were reinventing the healthcare system? Oh. And right now the physician is given, here are 50,000 patients, you're responsible for them. And on some you'll make no money, on others you'll make a loss, and then on the vast majority, no one's coming to you, so you'll make all the money on them. What if pharmacists were told that you are in charge of people's medication? You talk to whoever you need to talk to, and you have a budget of I'm making this up, $30 million to handle all the patients associated with this. And if patients are getting the drugs, great. If you want to talk to the doctor and cut off certain drugs and make sure that the patient's getting the right drugs and sort of through medication therapy management. I think what you're really pointing to is the fact that we have no skin in the game.
Right.
So is that the future of medicine, which is pharmacists start controlling drug use in conjunction with other clinicians such as physicians?
But then do pharmacists start acting like PBMs and saying, listen, I'm going to trial this person on metformin, and I don't really know if I want to get them off metformin to get them on the right drug that they belong on, because I don't want to put them on this branded expensive product.
Great point. But the difference between a PBM and a pharmacist, and I'm playing devil's advocate 100% right now, But the difference between a PBM and a pharmacist, according to me, is the pharmacist is accessible, and me as the patient can go up to the pharmacist and go, "What the hell are you talking about?" On the other hand, with the PBM, I got to submit an application, and then every and then I can sort of change my opinion and go to the PBM and go, "I'd like to reapply, and I'd like to argue and appeal and blah blah blah," and it's all happening via paper, and that whole process takes 6 months, and at the end of the year, they might just drop you off. So, is that process different because pharmacists are more accessible and therefore gives more opportunities for medication therapy management?
Yeah, maybe, but then you still get people that they're going to own that business, right? You're still going to have CVSs that are going to say, we're putting protocols in place, even if the patient walks up to you and says, we want, I want to be on my Ozempic or whatever the heck.
Yeah.
And then CVS is going to have parameters, or Walgreens, or even the independent pharmacy owner is going to say, I really still want to, I'd like to make 10% on that 30 million instead of 8.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that PBMs have a major role. Pharmacists curse out PBMs, saying that they're horrible and they prevent access to drugs. However, what they do is clinically sound. And well, in most cases, or in many cases. And the fact is that since you're doing it en masse, there are people who fall through the cracks. So I guess my question then becomes, does it make sense to have a PBM for Instagram and Twitter to look at if a certain ad or a certain promotion is compliant? Like, should that be a thing? Someone to gate check, if you will.
So, I mean, you're essentially saying pharma guidelines for all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where who that falls under to. I mean, I would say that if pharma guidelines are in place for Pepcid AC, if I make a TV commercial, then those pharma guidelines and regulations should be in place for a person that's on Instagram talking about it. I would agree, like 100% should go across the board.
So the pharma guidelines, by the way, are really more. So first of all, they apply to only companies who are part of pharma. So it's a voluntary code. It's not an actual. Okay. So that's number one. So that's PHRMA. Then there are pharma laws and guidances and stuff, which come from the FDA. According to the FDA itself, guidances are by definition voluntary and non-binding on either the FDA or pharma. But it's treated at a practical level like a law, because most companies don't want to go sit and fight the FDA. Which really leaves the standard of truthful and not misleading, which is really the standard everyone has to figure out right now. So your question then becomes, if you've got Instagram influencers, how realistic is it that they are being appropriately trained for lack of a better term, peddling OTC medication?
I mean, based on the influencers I've seen, I don't think they're trained on a whole lot. So
that's my question. What if Dan Bilzerian comes out and starts talking about the next, what do you call it, eugenics?
Yeah.
There you go.
Him, Frank Thomas, Doug Flutie, Dan Bilzerian. Yeah.
Like, is that necessarily bad? Like, more I think about, like, why isn't someone using him? It's not like he's really busy doing
I know, right? I think we should bring him on the show.
Yeah, Dan?
Yeah, we know each other really well.
You've been to his parties?
Yeah, right. I'm the hit of his parties. He actually doesn't invite me anymore because I was just taking away too much attention from him.
That makes sense. That's reasonable. For those people who find this content objectionable, we will not allow Rudy anymore, just so everyone's aware. That might be how we control the content. But we actually, hopefully you guys just had some fun. This was a lot of fun for me. I don't know if Rudy had fun. He may actually decide not to show back up next time. But he's traveling.
Wowed by your knowledge and intelligence.
It's true. I seem to have that effect on a lot of people. except my mom.
Except your mom, who thinks you're an idiot.
Basically, that's basically what happened. My mom's extremely concerned. Well, she was extremely concerned about how I'm going to cope in life, but things work out. But this was awesome, Rudy. Thanks again for coming on. This was
a great
fun.
time. I hope people at least laughed a little bit.
We didn't even go to the second conversation, but hopefully next time around we'll talk about that. Thanks everyone. This was awesome, and we'll talk to you guys soon.